Good morning, dear friends. Now we'll start second day of our conference. I wish you very interesting, very productive day. Now we'll have very interesting panels with political and social leaders of Ukraine, and they will present their view for the future of Ukraine. And in different capacities, these three people will play a very important role in the nearest future of Ukraine. That's why it's interesting for us. But now I want just to remind you that during our conference, and especially in the end of the conference, please don't forget to tell to each other that next year in Yalta. And now, please, Stephen and Yulia Vladimirovna, floor is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's fair to say that there is a great deal of interest and excitement in this morning's session. For all those of us who take a great interest in Ukrainian politics, this is going to be quite an hour and a half, I think. We have, as Victor just said, three figures who are going to be instrumental, hugely important in charting and shaping the course of Ukraine's political future in the coming years. We heard from President Poroshenko yesterday, and I think it's fair to say that he spoke with the passion of a president who is aware of the political timetable. He is a man who I think is looking to next year and all of the political events that we know are going to take place in this country, including, it just so happens, a presidential election and then parliamentary elections. So that is very much the context in which we're going to talk to our three political figures today. First up, we are delighted to welcome up onto the stage Yulia Tymoshenko, who needs no real introduction from me. Suffice to say that she has been a hugely important figure in Ukraine's past recent politics, as well as a player in the future of this country. She has been prime minister, she has been political prisoner, she has been a struggler for an independent Ukraine for a very long time. And she, I'm delighted to say, is our first guest. She will address us, and then I'll get the opportunity to ask her some questions. The format is simple. Each of our guests is going to give us opening remarks, which will probably take up about half of the time we have available, roughly 25 minutes to half an hour for each of our speakers. So half of that time will be remarks and then questions from me. Just to say that following Yulia, we have Anatoly Gritsenko, and we then have Slava Vakarchuk, and I will introduce them as we bring them to the stage. But for now, Yulia, welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning. If you would like to give us your opening remarks, either sitting at the chair or at the podium, and then I'd be delighted if you'd take some questions from me. And ladies and gentlemen, let's give every one of our guests a very warm welcome.
Thank you very much for such a warm introduction, and I would like to welcome everyone who is here today. Thank you for being in Ukraine. It means that Ukraine has a lot of friends that can walk together with us this difficult path of building the state. Thank you very much, Stephen, for saying that at the times when I was behind the bars, you invited my daughter for Heart Talk, and that was a big support for me and for her at that time. And when she visited me in prison, she said that Stephen, it was really hard talk with Stephen, but a very humane and with the huge support, and it was my pleasure. Thank you very much. And generally speaking, there's a good tradition that the moderators of YES conferences then become the foreign ministers, and sometimes, foreigners become ministers in Ukraine too, so who knows? Well, I would like to really stick to the topic of our discussion, and it's a very interesting topic, how Ukrainian politicians view the future of Ukraine. We would like them to open their eyes and see the present day first, because then you would see very clearly what the future holds. But I can firmly say about my vision of Ukraine. I see Ukraine as a free, independent, integral country with Donbass and Crimea prosperous and rich. I see Ukraine where happy families live, who have everything they need to be happy in their country, and they're not looking elsewhere for their happiness as it is happening right now. I see Ukraine a successful state that investors want to come to, because we will have the rule of law, the fair courts. I see Ukraine a member of the unified European family and a full-fledged member of NATO. But I also would like all of our guests and the leaders of the European countries to see that future as well. See us as part of Europe and see us as part of NATO, and then our efforts and our goals would coincide. In reality, the question that all Ukrainians probably are asking today is what is happening and how do you correct the situation. You can't really disregard all of the good things that have been done in the 4.5 years after the Revolution of Dignity, and I don't want to be talking in a way that everything is bad. No, it's not. The mere fact that even the military aggression and the huge problems that Ukraine faced, the war that has taken our peace away, dozens of thousands of lives, parts of the territory, but even that war brought the people together, brought the Ukrainian nation together, and for the first time in the history of independent Ukraine, we have seen that almost 70% of people in Ukraine are willing to join the European family, and this is the first time we have reached 50% of NATO membership support. It means that the society, the Ukrainian society, Ukrainian people clearly see their strategy of moving forward, very clearly see the goal, the independence, the peace and our unity, our future in the Western European civilization. But at the same time, we have to be very honest in answering the question. We do need peace, but what is going to be the price of that peace? We need peace, and where is the path that will take us there? And the only opinion that I think I will voice, that each Ukrainian thinks about, that we need peace, but not by means of capitulation of Ukraine. That's precisely what Ukrainian citizens are thinking of. And the fact that today not everything is as good as it should be in terms of getting to the peace does not mean and should not be the reason that we should compromise the Ukrainian interests, by means of this hybrid peace. And because we need to unite our country and bring back the Crimea and Donbass. And I would like to appeal to everyone who's sitting here. I would like to ask you, Ukraine is an independent state who has paid a huge price to have the right to build its future independently, its history independently. And please don't propose to Ukraine the ways and the options that one way or the other are making parts of the territory semi-Ukrainian or are transforming parts of the territory integrated in Ukraine, but totally at the same time controlled by the aggressor country. We should not allow this. We need the real peace. It means that we to restore the full integration of our territory and our borders. We have to see the full demilitarization of the occupied territories. We need the aggressor country, Russia, to leave us alone, and 2 million refugees that are called IDPs to go back to their homes. We want to see real peace and real restoration of our territorial integrity. I don't want the frozen conflicts or hybrid war to be proposed as a solution. Only a full-fledged solution should be in place. In terms of the Crimea, the worst that could happen is to postpone that resolution, or either to totally forget about it, or to pretend that we have forgotten about it. And when from time to time, in one European country or the other, we see the maps where Ukraine and the Crimea is cut off or stitched to the aggressor country, this should not be this slow motion to get the world and Ukraine prepared to the perception that the Crimea is cut off. That will not happen. None of the Ukrainians will ever accept the division of our territory. Both the Crimea and Donbass should be brought back in full as full-fledged territories of Ukraine. That's what will happen, and I believe that. One other question is, what is the path to the peace? That's a very important question. We have Minsk treaties, and we respect them to a certain extent because we do consider that the conflict could have been much more severe and all-encompassing had it not been for them, and the Minsk Accord has slowed down the aggression. But we should not forget at the same time that in 2017 compared to 2016 there was 100,000 times more violations of the truce than compared to 2016. It means that that aggression is ongoing and that it has new manifestations. The danger is that we have lost 4 years, and in the meantime the processes that are happening are unacceptable. And these processes are the partial institutionalization of the newly created so-called states of Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republic. They established their national banks, they established their administrations, they have their ministers, and in principle they demonstrate some kind of way forward to creating their fake state, and that has been done for these 4 years that we have allowed them to do so, and we should not have that happen. That's why I believe that we go back to the strategies that were put in place and signed. I have here the Budapest Memorandum. We all know it very well. I am against the Budapest Memorandum to put aside and to pretend that it have never existed. If the strongest countries of the world give their guarantees to any other country, including Ukraine, if we forget about the nuclear weapons, if we agree to put it aside, we should be sure that these things are not just papers, that these are real guarantees, who have weight and are given for the purpose of the strategy of non-proliferation and the strategy of reduction of the nuclear weapon to become reality. In Ukraine, certain international projects are being tested, and one of them is the test where the guarantees work or not. And that's why that after the rebooting of government, we have all possibilities, without destroying all of the achievements that have been already reached based on the Minsk Accord, to open the new window of opportunity to talk about the new strategies. And one of them is acting on the guarantees that were provided to Ukraine in the past and going back to Budapest format. But at the same time, we count on strengthening sanctions. We count on Ukraine to be on the agenda, and the Ukrainian issues will be discussed at the table in the presence of Ukraine, taking into account the key strategic interests of Ukraine. And that's why the new strategy for peace is something that Ukraine needs and that Europe and the world needs. And I'm asking you for this work to start now, because if when the presidential elections are is over, we will have next day to start doing this. Now we have enough time to prepare and do what we need to do to establish the new vision. As regard to a successful country, economically successful, we would like to propose the new economic course where we will show the country that will stop being commodity-based, the country that will have an incentive for the technological development, but it can be successful only then when we have strong institutions, if we have strong, effective governance. We may have read, and I'm sure you have, the Robinson's book, Why the Nations Degrade, and there's a very good conclusion there, that the success of the nation depends not on the geographic location, not on the resources and subsoil, not even on wars, the historic factors. It depends on one only factor: the efficiency and the strength of governance in the country. So the governance system, in other words, and the rest of this is just the spin-off from the good governance. And we have to really acknowledge that the governance system, the system against which two revolutions were risen, against which the protesters come out, the Ukrainian citizens, that system has not been demolished or reformed in the 4.5 years. We want to propose to Ukraine and to all friends of Ukraine the way forward that today could put together a very powerful plan of realistically reforming, reconstructing the governance system. Just make-up doesn't work. Sectoral changes are simply being absorbed by that system that has been destroying us for 24 years since the constitution was put in place. I want to ask you not to rely just on make-up. I believe that only by reforming the constitution would be able to build a strong judiciary, would be able to put away the dual government. The existing institutions are uncontrolled, unaccountable, neither the civil servants nor any branch of government. It means that misuse of power that prevent investors to come in have an institutional, systemic character. We want to propose to work all together to develop the new vision of Constitution of Ukraine that would allow to reboot the things that don't allow this country to stand up firmly on their feet, to reboot this old corrupt system and humiliating system. And corruption is just a spin-off of the fact that the governance system failed. We see very clear reforms, very clear changes that need to be made, and we will make them. The new economic course may be successful only under one condition: if the governance system will really be changed. There has to be an in-depth change. And another thing, which I think is very wrong, and that is very reminiscent of the Soviet times, is that at the time where almost 80% of Ukrainians think that Ukraine is moving forward in the internal reforms, in the informal transition in the wrong direction, at the same time we see hear these victorious speeches. We see the things that we have here presented as some fake successes, and that all is so reminiscent of the Soviet Brezhnev time, where the governance system, a failing system and a failing development structure was disguised by a very powerful, energetic speech with absolutely unreal and fake patriotism. I'm against this. We need to have a very clear diagnosis and not just to cover it up with nice-looking things. I think that Ukraine again faces this new window of opportunities that we have been losing many times. And I believe in my country. I believe in the creative class of my country. I believe in youth and I believe in future. And our team, big professional team, sophisticated team, is ready to come together with all friends, with all experts who are working with international community and to show good results.
Yulia, thank you very much indeed. We don't have much time, so I'm going to give you quick questions, and if you would, I'd like brief and concise answers so that we can get as much of a question and answer as possible. So, I just said, Yulia, let's keep the questions and answers as quick as we can so we can cover a lot of territory. You've just made a very passionate commitment to constitutional reform, economic reform. I see around this city many, many posters of you committing yourself to a new course for Ukraine. How can Ukrainians believe in your commitment to deep structural reform when your own party has been the most anti-reform party, if you measure it vote by vote, in the Ukrainian parliament? Why would any Ukrainian believe that you have suddenly changed and become a serious reformer?
Can I make precise against which reforms we have been voting? If you could be more precise, against which specific reforms we were opposing, and I will give you the answer. Our team was voting for establishing all anti-corruption bodies. We have been voting for NABU, for Anti-Corruption Court, for the National Agency on Preventing Corruption. We have been part of the coalition and we're doing all it takes for reforms to happen. We were voting for amendments to Constitution in terms of reforming the judiciary. What was there that we haven't supported? Can anyone from the hall tell us?
About economic reform. You tend, in your speeches and your presentations, to say that you will deliver, and I'm quoting you from today, a happy, free, independent and rich Ukraine. And yet when it comes to structural economic reforms, you often present an obstacle, a block to reform. And indeed, if we talk specifically about where Ukraine sits today, the government, it seems, is about to...
Could you give me the example?
Hang on, let's talk.
One example.
Well, let's talk about what's about to happen in this country. Gas prices are going to go up. You seem to be promising the people that you will deliver much cheaper gas tariffs. How can you deliver this and work with the IMF and say that you're committed to structural reform?
Well, look, it is my pleasure that there was no fundamental example where our team in the parliament somewhere would be a barrier to the reform was not voiced. It means that facts are what matters in this heated discussion. In terms of tariffs, it's a very simple answer. I believe in the market. If Ukraine builds a natural gas market, and we will be able to see how the pricing is formed in a market manner. Please raise your hand, all of our international guests. who domestically has the price set, gas price set by the government, by the decree of the government. Why not? Why aren't you setting your prices by the government decrees? Don't your countries set the price for gas by the decrees of the government? Well, that's what we have. And that's why my strategy is not to set the price for gas by the decree of the government on bread, on light, on butter, but to create real markets and not to substitute the notions when the law on gas market is passed and international supplier of gas are prohibited to independently supply it to Ukraine and sell it on the energy stock exchanges. I can't understand how can you create a market when the license for exploration is given only to the corrupt entourage of the one, I forget his name. I can't understand how can you have a gas market when in the last 4.5 years none of the steps were made to bring into Ukraine, like Europe is doing, to bring LNG to Ukraine. So I support the market, but I'm against manual price setting, which is not market at all. We will create the market, and it will be a real market, and we will launch investors in to explore the gas here with good conditions, without corruptions.
I've got 2 more questions, and you're going to have to give me quick answers because I'm getting signals that we're out of time. So here's the first one. Russia. You spend a lot of time in your presentation to us telling us that you are going to be tough. You demand full restitution of Ukraine's sovereign territory. There will be, you said, absolutely no capitulation. But I think you know you are vulnerable on this issue. And I would say also that I think President Poroshenko thinks you are vulnerable on this issue, partly because when you were leading the government in Ukraine, you struck a gas deal with Russia, which many Ukrainians will not forget and which they regard as selling out Ukraine's interest. And also because even now people wonder about your relationship with Moscow and whether you actually are going to prove to be too close to interests in Russia. So how do you convince Ukrainians that you mean what you say?
I like hard talks, really. I love them. That's super. You know, you ask a beautiful question. I like these horrible gas treaties, right? It's awful. And now there is a process against Mr. Manafort, and a very good prosecutor from United States displayed to those how much money Manafort was getting to instill into the mentality of people, including like Stephen, to instill the thought that gas contracts are absolutely bad for Ukraine. Dear friends, that's absurd. This is nonsense, because very recently, after the gas contracts were disputed in the Stockholm court, and they were forced to pay Ukraine more than $4.5. So someone from the Kremlin speakers stood up and said, we need to break those contracts urgently. What did the president say? So no, don't touch those contracts. These are holy contracts. You know, I don't want us to live in the fake world. You can take those quotations. I think someone from the Putin speakers or Gazprom, I don't remember, and he answered, and the president said, no, these contracts will stay, and this is the basis of everything that Ukraine has in the Stockholm courts, all the victories. So I speak for each and every letter of those contracts, and I will tell you that that was a real freedom. It was a multifold increase of transit for price through Ukraine, and these contracts end in 2019. And what are they going to do then? That's a question.
My point is, do you recognize you have a vulnerability on the Russia issue? It looks as though Mr. Poroshenko is going to try to exploit that vulnerability, and how are you going to counteract that? But quickly, please, quickly.
Dear friends, you are all intellectuals. Just think for a minute, why such a pro-Russian politician, and absolutely the pro-Russian government of Yanukovych put in prison behind the bars, and such a pro-Western politician that rules the country. The pro-Russian government of Yanukovych was appointed him the Minister of Economy. Do you really think that Yanukovych was not the puppet of Kremlin? Does anyone think that here? And if he imprisoned me, that speaks about the fact that not Yanukovych did it, but someone else. And we all are fighting against political manipulations and fakes. And it's a very pity that the person who has business in Russia, who pays tax to Russian government, and who does business with the representatives of Russia here, can raise his voice against me, who her whole life stood up for our pro-Western cause, who was fighting for Ukraine to be part of Western civilization, and personally, with my own hands and my own signature, was submitting to NATO our application to get an action plan for membership. Tell me, please, where is logic here? And that's why I would like to ask not to trust the pre-election fakes and black propaganda that was construed and created by Manafort, and which is being created by the new government of Ukraine, management of Ukraine. Don't trust them, because I will do my best for Ukraine to be a strong European country, and we will not have the corruption that is prevailing in Ukraine. When people are asked today, what is the first problem that they want to tackle and fight, they say the war. They are against the war and they want peace. The second problem is their poverty, their misery. It increased twice for the last 4 years. And the third problem, do you know that what they mention is a huge level of high-level top corruption, and only after that come healthcare, education, and children. That's what the characteristic of our modern day, and I will never support when the big pompous speeches are covering up the facade. We need to name things what they are.
Last question. Your negatives, your poll negatives, are as high pretty much as President Poroshenko's. The two of you have extraordinarily high disapproval ratings. Over the next 6 months, how are you going to bring down that extremely high level of disapproval that you have from many Ukrainians in this country?
Wow.
Another question. Could you tell me, in which country, democratic country, the presidential candidates and parties are getting 100% of support? Where did you see that? Democracy is exactly about people having choice. Someone will support one politician, others support other politicians. But I have very good piece of news for you. The recent local elections in the merged, amalgamated communities that happened in April, our party, our team, strong team, patriotic team, pro-European team, got 35% on the elections. And according to the opinion polls, me as a candidate in the president, only 12% people are not ready to vote. I think that's a very good result, eh? And we will have the victory, and all together with you, together with the creative class of Ukraine, we will build this great country of Ukraine, and we will have everything that we have dreamed about, but it's time to implement these dreams. Glory to Ukraine.
I thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We must move on to our second personality of the morning, but Yulia, it's been a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks a lot. Spasibo. Thank you very much indeed.